This might be one of the more boring lists, and that's saying something. January tradition means I finally get to work on my end of year list for the previous year, although tradition also means I'll finish the edit and upload this thing in February. I may have bought fewer toys in 2024. A chunk of my spending shifted towards things like camera gear, old and obsolete media, as well as various movie and music memorabilia. Having said that, the toys I did buy were a tad pricier than I'm used to, and even taking into account things like Black Friday sales, numerous discount vouchers, general inflation, and the US dollar turning to shit after November. All things considered, my spending kinda balanced out is all I'm saying. As always, this is about the stuff that I've bought for myself to add to the collection. While I do get some lovely gifts, and I do thrift some cool stuff for the Toy Fair sale pile, this criteria helps narrow things down. I've always resisted calling this a best and worst list because that's not what it is. I don't really do toy reviews on this channel. I save that for my website, but even then, that's about sharing my opinions on movies and such. And yeah, it would help with the algorithm, but calling it a best and worst list implies a sense of definitiveness about a quality of a product. Instead, I prefer to talk about the experience surrounding a toy. And you're gonna get a lot of that in this video. Transformers Collaborative Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Party Wallop by Hasbro. I've been pretty lukewarm when it comes to the various Transformers collaborations, even the ones crossing over with stuff I'm a big fan of. Back to the Future is fantastic, but I had minimal interest in a transforming DeLorean. I love Ghostbusters, but I couldn't muster up the enthusiasm for that one either. I'm usually an easy mark for this shit. Hell, it's been almost 30 years, and I still think the Star Trek X-Men crossover was bloody awesome. And they made 3 of those things, and I have them. I'm sure the crossover toys are good, or at the very least, people enjoy them. I say this with neutrality, I just don't care enough. But Ninja Turtles, that's my top tier, that's my shit. So there was a spark of curiosity when the Party Wallop was announced. What got me over the line was that I had a discount voucher with JB Hi-Fi. The toy itself is pretty okay. Faint praise indeed. I enjoy the novelty of it, and it does look cool, but honestly it swings and roundabouts. I appreciate that they didn't try to sell you 4 different figures, which I guess that's more of a Playmates gimmick, so there's no hassle about missing out on your favourite turtle. They've included 5 swap out heads, the 4 coloured bandanas, as well as a blank one. Also included are their iconic weapons. A couple of efficiencies I like about this toy is that you can store away the spare accessories on the toy itself, and they'll be hidden for the most part. I'm also amused by this belt buckle being flippable, so you can choose the corresponding letter. No fiddly extra little bit to lose under the couch. This is all offset by the fact that it's kind of an awkward toy, but I guess I could be describing most Transformers toys. Yeah, it looks cool, but the posing and articulation are kind of limited by all the panels getting in the way. The tolerances are not quite there, so a few tabs and pegs are sometimes a bit off. Some of the plastic feels kind of cheap. There's this chest piece that's actually a cheat, and in classic fashion just ends up being a shield. And regarding fiddly pieces you can lose, I don't get why they made this spare tire into a pizza that attaches with a simple pressure fit. Overall, I don't mind the novelty of it, but I don't think it's worth 99 Aussie dollars. This is more or less a Voyager class Transformer at a leader class price. Yes, I get it. Collaborative, licensing, etc. I know. But even with my discount voucher, it's still too pricey for my cheap ass taste. Mortal Kombat 1/6 scale Classic Sub-Zero by Storm Collectibles. I've said before how I struggle with the price of Storm Collectibles. I cannot fathom how they produce similar quality to the likes of NECA Toys, even Marvel Legends, but somehow they're twice as expensive, 3 to 4 times on the aftermarket. I've got one of their 7-inch figures in my collection, and I've seen a couple of others up close. Maybe it's because these were older releases and things have improved since then, but I don't see where the money goes. It's most likely because of smaller quantities being produced, but that's not a great balance of quality to price in my opinion. So when they announced a 1/6 scale range, my initial excitement disappeared like an erection in an old folks home. I lost any hope that I'd be able to get my hands on any of them because of the price. Get my hands on the figures, not the erection. Never mind. Then this popped up. Like many of my high-end collectibles, this was second-hand on eBay from an interstate seller. They relisted it a number of times, each time slightly cheaper. Eventually, it got to a price I was happy to pay, and I had a voucher too, so I pounced. Subby here is quite fantastic, as one would expect from such a price point. The details on the outfit are lovely. There's this extra little bit underneath the tunic that absolutely did not have to be there, but it is. The props and accessories are really cool too. And the articulation is absolutely spot on for a martial arts character with a base and a stand that helps in all those action poses. Although they're calling this the classic version, his tabard has the quilting of the MK2 version and the scar over one eye like the MK3 character, making this the younger sibling. This mashup exists because it's one of those DLC skins from MK11, and honestly, I'm loving it. The figure, I mean, not the DLC. I don't love chopping up content and presenting it as extra features for a price. There's something about it that's not quite on the same level as Hot Toys or Exo 6, but that may be a matter of degrees. One major drawback of getting secondhand stuff, one of Sub's ice power effects has a yellow tinge to it. Possibly from being displayed in a sunny room, I don't know, but the discoloration is a tad disappointing, and I'm still wondering if there is a way I could solve that. Sub-Zero is my favourite character from these games. Sure, I like Scorpion too. You can't have the epic rivalry without him, but I also think Scorpion is kinda like the Wolverine of Mortal Kombat, overused and overexposed. So much so they emphasised him too much in the reboot film and basically rewrote the lore of his involvement in the disappointing MK Legends animated movies. Regardless, Scorpion is understandably a very popular character, and because of that, his 1/6 scale figures was really hard to find at a price that didn't make me want to steal someone's kidney. You know, to sell, not as a fatality. Maybe they were right about violent video games. Like I said, epic rivalry, so while it's nice to have this guy, to complete the duo would be much better. Because of that, this wasn't originally on the list. That was up until a week into the new year. So I've had to rewrite and re-record this spot. Transformers 86 Studio Series Swoop by Hasbro. I'm gonna use this slot and this toy as an example to talk about something a little bigger than the toy itself. I've done it before, so get ready for a good old ramble, but first we have to go back about 12 months. I mentioned last year that I finally stopped having that fear of missing out when it comes to these toys. That lack of FOMO has tempered my expectations, and that's partly thanks to JB Hi-Fi getting stock in earlier and more consistently than anyone else around here. Although now going into 2024, that looks to be in danger, but we'll see. For a couple of years there, it looked as though JB Hi-Fi had first dibs on a variety of Hasbro toys, whether it be Transformers, Star Wars Black Series, or Marvel Legends. It appeared that way because other retailers would get some of that same stock a few months or many months later. Usually the smaller and less expensive stuff that fit toy sections of places like Kmart and Big W. This could all be a case of how the buyers at these places do things, but that was the perception. And I noticed this because I prefer to shop around for the cheapest price, and I prefer to do it locally. Some things I don't mind pre-ordering online, high-end stuff like from Exo 6 as an example, because it ends up being slightly cheaper than an imported, or a Ninja Turtle set from NECA Toys. more on that later. But if something like a toy is meant to be available at regular retail, like the stuff Hasbro makes, then I want to be able to go down to my local store, have a closer look at it, and decide if the price is right then and there. And maybe compare it to the store down the other end of the mall. But that can't happen when releases are staggered from retailer to retailer. I think I've made this argument before, which says a lot about how little things have changed. Right, here's the current problem. Let's say the first mob bring in a particular item and maybe they're asking a little too much for it, or it's not in my budget that exact moment. Ideally, I'd want to compare that price with another retailer, a bigger retailer, one that could potentially order in so much stock that they can undercut the pricier store. We don't owe corporations loyalty. We can and should be able to shop around. But what if, unknown to us, that retailer is the only one to stock it? And I'm not talking about store exclusives that we should be told about beforehand. I'm talking about toys that should be at multiple retailers, but for whatever reason, the buyers at those other chains decide, nah. And so I've just gambled my chance to get it because I wanted to save a bit of cash, and those other chains decided it wasn't worth the floor space. That's pretty much what happened with Swoop. I didn't pre-order Swoop, and I half knew he would be popular for all the completionists out there, but I also saw many of the previous Studio Series Dinobots warming shelves months after release, some even ending up on clearance, mainly because no one wanted to pay $99 for either slag or sludge. Pay for slag. As I observed in that clip, going into 2024, it looked as though JB Hi-Fi had lost their first dibs arrangement, if that was even a thing, and I recall a number of other retailers like PopCulture.com and Gamesman had pre-orders of their own. That gave a false sense of security that this would be everywhere. There were also a couple of delays in release, which also added to the paranoia. Like, why would I want to lock in a full payment for a product that is having issues getting here? And of course, by the time it finally released, around September, whatever remaining figures that made it to the shelves disappeared within days. To make it even more difficult to find, the JB Hi-Fi website has a tendency of removing popular listings a day before or on the day of release, making it impossible to track down which store has remaining stock. I went to 4 or 5 different JB stores in the span of 3 days, but came up empty-handed each time. And of course, the aftermarket was being its crooked self, but I ended up ordering this from my last resort site, Amazon, for about the same price as JB Hi-Fi, and free postage. Those other online places with pre-orders, some were pricier, some were the same price. All of them had added postage costs, and they got swooped up rather quickly too. That was back in late September. It's January of 2025 as I record this, and I still haven't seen it at the usual stores. Okay, so quick related tangent. I was on my way to JB Hi-Fi one night to pick up this toy, but instead I stopped into Kmart where they happened to have it for at least $10 less. The following week I went to that same Kmart and they stocked this one, also $10 less than JB Hi-Fi, but JB Hi-Fi only just put the pre-order up. So something's going on. Honestly, I don't mind this Swoop. It looks the part, replicating the 86 move design in all its fidelity. Nothing seems to be out of place, nothing seems to be wrong with it. The transformation is fine. It's a straightforward, solid little toy. It's just somewhat underwhelming for all the effort and cost. Transformers 86 Studio Series Optimus Prime by Hasbro. Similar story to Swoop. I didn't pre-order Optimus because I wanted to shop around for the best price. It's a commander class after all. Realised that only one local bricks and mortar retailer had it. Anyone online was asking more than retail and more than I wanted to pay. I eventually found him on Amazon for slightly less than retail, so yeah, a more positive result. I had learned my lesson with Swoop, so I knew to manage my expectations. But then again, when it comes to the last 4 years of Hasbro releases in Australia, I really should have known better anyway. I tend to get lulled into a false sense of complacency. Anyways, this is a bloody awesome Optimus Prime. I had little issue with the Earthrise figure. More accurately, I had little issue with the figure itself. The trailer was trash and felt like an afterthought that was only included to justify the leader class price. With the non-video game War for Cybertron originally being the new canon and pseudo G1 without going into full-blown nostalgia, you adjust your mindset to be a little more open of what is presented, as long as it's not outright bad. But after some supposed reshuffling at the company, someone decided it was time to embrace the classic movie revival without the pretense. And they went balls deep with this one. I mean, look at this packaging, depicting one of the most iconic moments from the 1986 movie. The toy itself is magnificent. I did an unboxing video on this already, and I reckon my opinion hasn't changed on much since. I keep using the term mini masterpiece when I talk about these various Studio Series toys, and considering how many versions they've done of Prime in masterpiece scale, it's obvious they transferred what they, Takara, learned over to this release. I'm still a little irked by the gap on the back of the cab, but obviously that's meant to be hidden by the trailer, which is a massive improvement over the Earthrise version. It looks great, it's to proper scale, it functions as a playset of sorts, as well as a practical storage for Prime's accessories. I think my only disappointment is that roller is no longer spring-loaded like the original G1 toy, but whatever. There's been more consideration, or proper consideration with this, which I can appreciate. I know some people are bothered by Prime's thighs being white, whereas others love it because it's screen accurate. They were white in the cartoon because the character needed to be red, white and blue, because US jingoism. But we've all just accepted grey ever since then to imply metal. I don't have an issue with it, nor am I having an orgasm over accuracy. I simply think it's interesting. Throwback to Rodimus up there somewhere. I was fortunate to get that toy for about 30% off on release because, well, that was Big W, a major chain that could order so much stock as to be able to do such a discount on launch. But I haven't been so lucky with the other Commander class cronies due to the limited or first dibs arrangement, if that's what it is. I still have a big problem with their excessive pricing, even though I saved about 10% on Optimus here. It's all these little things that add up and embolden scalpers, but that's for later. I could let that affect my overall opinion on this. Hell, I've added items to the other list for far less, but honestly, I'm just really pleased with how Optimus Prime, one of my childhood heroes, looks in this form. It feels almost perfect, and I'm happy to take that. Star Trek: The Next Generation, 1/6 scale Ensign Ro by X06. Normally I'm absolutely glowing about X06's output, and this Ensign Ro is pretty awesome. However, there was an issue with this figure out of the box that I think is important to highlight, considering how much these tend to go for. This didn't get the long-form YouTube unboxing that the other Star Trek figures received because it arrived around the time I wasn't feeling too crash hot to perform for the camera. I rarely am, but here we are. So instead, it got the stripped down TikTok treatment. During that unboxing, I noticed the right arm felt floppy. At first I thought the joint was too loose, but soon realised that it had simply popped out of its socket. I had to surmise that because you can't take the uniform off to see it directly. That's right, you little perverts! Anyways, with a bit of blind finagling, I was able to pop the joint back in. But here's the next problem. The pivot joint was stuck, which means every time I tried to raise her arm to the side, the joint I popped back in would pop back out again. I think I figured out what may have happened, and please keep in mind this is all assumptions based on zero knowledge of what actually happens in the production process. During either the process of putting on her uniform or during quality control, the person doing that task probably lifted the arm hard enough for it to pop out, but because of the speed in which they have to do the work, didn't realise that's not how it's supposed to move. As far as they're concerned, the shoulder moved, it's done. Again, because you can't take the uniform off, I had to use my imagination, don't be filthy, and so while keeping what I imagine is a ball joint in place, I tried to loosen and unlock the other joint. You know, in that way we have to do for a lot of action figures with stiff joints. And finally it worked. What needed to move, moved, and what needed to stay in place, stayed in place. I found one other person online that had this issue, so it wasn't a one-off, and they were able to rectify it too. Setting aside the hiccup of quality control, of course, it's a fantastic 1/6 scale figure. As always, the detail, the fidelity, the cut and drape of the uniform, it's all quite excellent. The only remaining issue is that the promo pics and the packaging showed a data pad as one of the accessories, but it was missing. Not like it fell out, but there's no spot in the packaging for one to be included. Someone even asked on my TikTok about it because theirs was absent too. It's such a minor thing. I can get a pad from another figure, but again, for a collectible of this price range, it's odd for it to be excluded, even if at the last minute. Oh, and some of you who've been here a while may be asking, wait, weren't you only going to focus on the Picard figures? First of all, up yours. Secondly, yes, this is my first divergence from that. Probably because I had a crush on Michelle Forbes when I was a teenager. Sonic the Hedgehog, Eggmobile, and Giant Robot Battle Set by Jakks Pacific. I continually sing the praises of the Jakks Pacific range of Sonic the Hedgehog toys, and yet I'm surprised this is the first time I've included them in the main list. Across their various IPs in the last few years, they've been able to combine and balance a bunch of elements in such an impressive manner. These are toys first and foremost, so they are simple enough to be kids' playthings, but there's also enough fidelity to them that they look like they're right off the screen. Granted, these were already simple designs, but it's still impressive. There's just enough complexity so they're not static vinyl figurines like we've seen so many times in the past, yet they're also cheap enough in spite of the moving parts and articulation. And there doesn't seem to be this whole one and done rarity or exclusive bullshit like the scalpers would like you to believe. They're the ones buying up all the stock, which is why they disappear so quickly around here and end up on eBay for twice the price. If you missed out on a character in this wave, they'll be repackaged in a later wave but with a new accessory. These are so good that despite being more of a Sonic fan, I've been tempted to buy the Mario toys too. Hell, their current range of Simpsons toys are surprisingly good and simple and fun too. Going back to price for a second, the two specific toys I want to talk about here might not have made it to the main list if I had paid full retail for them. Fortunately, I was able to get the Giant Robot for 20% off at Big W's toy sale, which was before Toymate got them in, and that's where I got the Eggmobile at 50% off. Here's the thing. Both these toys were released in 2022. They didn't make it to our shores until 2024, and to order them online was cost prohibitive. So it's a wonderful relief to finally see them up close. Same thing I said before, these are fun playthings, toys that have a high degree of fidelity to the original designs, but they also present a level of play and interactivity that I find kind of flawed, yet ultimately well-intentioned. For instance, remember in the original games when you went up against Robotnik in the boss fights and you had to spin jump and hit the Eggmobile a number of times and eventually it would break apart? Well, that's what happens here. You take the included Sonic figure and you're supposed to strike him on the here. And it falls apart like in the game because, you know, 16-bit graphics. The giant robot also has that feature too, but it's a lot trickier. You've got Sonic in spin mode here, and you use this catapult, and you try to aim on this trigger that's on his chest. Ooh, I hit him at that time. Oh, missed. Come on, let's try it again. Come on. Do I keep hitting his crotch? Okay, so not quite there. See, what happens here is you're supposed to strike here a number of times. Each time causing some damage. And there you go. Apart from the fact that the triggers are kind of stiff and more robust than they should be, this catapult is not great either. It's still a bloody fun idea. Again, Jakks Pacific are doing so bloody well with these toys. They're this wonderful, possibly near-perfect balance between fun plaything and faithful-looking collectible. And I love it. Marvel Legends: Deadpool and Wolverine by Hasbro. Huh. This is the third Hasbro entry on this side of the list. I'm not even sure it's entirely their fault, to be honest. I don't think I have the words to properly express my disgust for the skeevy little ecosystem that is the toys and collectibles aftermarket. I've been fortunate that I can often find stuff for less than retail. There have been times I just happen to have a discount voucher. That eBay Plus yearly subscription is worth it, by the way. Hell, there are plenty of positive examples of buying secondhand in this very video. The aftermarket isn't a complete hellscape, but there's a corner of it that churns my stomach like an overflowing septic tank in an abattoir. Let's start by clarifying. I really enjoyed Deadpool and Wolverine, which surprised the hell out of me, considering just how over these characters I've been for the last decade. That's not the fault of Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, who've always been good in these roles, especially this time. But the characters have been so overused, so overexposed, and Deadpool has always been accompanied by this unnerving anticipation and dread for the wave of obnoxious Deadpool cosplayers and their antics come every convention cycle. Anyway, I did enjoy the film enough to want to buy these figures, and I'm glad I picked them up in the first week they released at JB Hi-Fi. I've yet to open them, partly because I never got around to rearranging my toy room like I kept planning over the last 12 months. Maybe 24 months. So I have no major opinions on the figures themselves at this point, but obviously that's not what this is about. Not long after the figures sold out locally, I saw prices for these double on eBay. Months later, they've tripled, even quadrupled original retail price. And I'm left wondering, to what end? I get that these characters are popular, but is anyone gonna pay that much for Marvel Legends figures? Like I can understand if someone bought them at a discount and resold them for retail, or even close to that. I can even begrudgingly understand if this were years later and they were long sold out, but we're only a few months after release. Hell, there's even another wave of stock supposedly on the way if Pop Culture's website is to be believed. Even I forget sometimes that this is the same company that keeps re-releasing Transformers figures over and over and over again, repaint after repaint after repaint. They're not exactly the type to stop beating the dead horse just because their shoes are suddenly wet. So yeah, these scalpers are trying to make their big money now, but it still feels incredibly vulgar to prey on the stupid, even if they are Deadpool fans. But is that even what this is? As a toy flipper myself, I can understand finding something for cheap and reselling it, but this feels disgustingly excessive. These prices aren't realistic. Even if you take into account people thinking these are sold out everywhere, never to be seen again. Who's desperate enough to pay 3 times retail for this? I wonder, if This is part of that scam that I've highlighted before, where people list stuff on eBay asking for insane amounts and prohibitively expensive postage just to make their personal collections appear more valuable. Like I said, I flip toys too, twice a year at the Adelaide Comic Toy Fair. And so I end up hearing all sorts of stories about scalpers that buy out all the stock from a single store, or how some staff secretly set shit aside for their mates, all of which are dick moves made by a bunch of dicks. I've discussed the aftermarket before, as well as toy anxiety and the fear of missing out, a number of times around here, and I'll admit, having thought I was over it, the recent Studio Series Swoop brought back some of that anxiety with these, and I resent being made to feel that way, even just a little bit. Pixar's Up, Spotlight Series Kevin by Mattel. I let this one slip through my fingers so many times. Up is my all-time favourite Pixar movie, and it continually frustrates me that a majority of the merch for that film, whether it be during its original release or subsequent anniversaries, rarely ever make it to our side of the world, except for maybe pop vinyl after pop vinyl after pop vinyl. But that's fucking landfill fodder now. While this was not what I would consider cheap, it was less than what other people have been asking for it, despite ordering it from Canada, which I managed to do before their postal strike. I could have got it cheaper, but I tend to dilly-dally way too much, mainly because I was hoping it would make it to our shores the same way the Spotlight series Lightyear figure did, and that was really cheap when it got here. Anyway, there's not too much to say about this Kevin figure that I haven't already said about other toys already. Like the Jakks Pacific stuff, Mattel also have this ability to balance fun plaything and good-looking collectible, especially when they do stuff like the Spotlight series. Even though Spotlight series does sound kind of pretentious, admittedly it does lean further into collectible with those things rather than plaything, but that's a matter of degrees, I guess. The reason I say that is because the figure has enough articulation to pose and play with, and enough detail to look good on display, especially with this very simple display base. Kevin also comes with a bar of chocolate and her little babies, which are all probably choking hazards, but they're all flocked, which is a really lovely detail. I also appreciate that this is the same scale as the featured favourites Russell that I bought previously, although I believe Kevin was released first, so the onus would have been on that Russell to get it right, but whatever. Regardless, I'm just so relieved to finally have this. I don't know if you picked up on it, but I kind of struggled with the frustrating side of the list this year. I mean, I always find it harder to an extent, mainly because, in my mind, there are always fewer purchases that I would class in the negative, or some things simply aren't bad enough to highlight. This year the list felt even shorter than before. It could be my more relaxed attitude about things, or I legitimately bought fewer things, so the pool to choose from was smaller. I don't do negativity for the sake of negativity, so the less time you spend up to your waist in it, the less you have to worry that someone pissed in the water. Having said that, I will point out when shit goes wrong. Hell, I even repeated a couple of topics because things haven't changed. In any case, here are the dishonourable mentions. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The First Turtles, 40th Anniversary, San Diego Comic-Con 2024 exclusive by NECA Toys. I pre-ordered directly from NECA's website. I received my tracking number at the end of August. It normally takes 4 to 6 weeks for something to arrive in Australia from the US. The tracking number never updated from the beginning. It is currently January of 2025 as I record this, and still no figures. I'm normally gushing even about the toys from NECA, because they do such great quality work at a not always offensive price. I also appreciate that they offer an allocation online for those who can't make it to San Diego Comic-Con. It's more often than not a fairly painless process, but I've also been critical of their screw-ups and less amusing ideas like the Auto T scam and the Haulathon debacle. This is a massive fuck-up. Midway through November, they addressed said fuck-up on their social media. Technical glitch, apparently. People have weighed in on the apparent real reasons elsewhere. It's alleged that some folks were even sent a second one. Nothing official, nothing I really care about. Without proper transparency and instead a boilerplate excuse, not really in a sympathetic mood. They said they were going to get it sorted in the next week. Keep in mind, this was back in November, so maybe they resent orders in December. Holiday season. Takes a bit more time. But yeah, I waited long enough. Shouldn't have taken 3 months to address the problem, though. Been tempted to reach out to customer service, but I heard others get the runaround or were being dismissed outright. Last I checked, someone in the UK finally got theirs a few days ago. Generally pleased for them, so maybe they're still on the way to Australia? I don't know, I hope so. But even if it does arrive, or arrives by the time this goes up, this still makes it the most frustrating toy purchase of 2024. The favourite side of the list changed so many times over the course of writing the script and even during the recording. I don't think that's happened before, at least not to this extent. Some items even swapped over to the other list after I started writing because I realised, no, that wasn't good actually. This is why I love being able to articulate my thoughts and feelings like this, because it helps me understand what I love and what I don't beyond think good and think bad, which is what most of the interwebs is made up of, unfortunately. All that and porn. Here are the honourable mentions. Transformers Optimus Prime helmet by Modern Icons. This is fucking awesome! Ooh. Ooh. Okay, this isn't a toy per se, it's barely a plaything, but I've been known to bend the rules in these lists before. Honestly, I just get giddy knowing I finally have this. As you've seen throughout this video, I often get on my high horse about shopping around and looking for the best price, and that has bit me in the ass quite a few times, this included. Now, it's not without precedent though. More times than not, I've been able to score Marvel Legends or Black Series replicas for a lot less than retail, whether they be discounted during like a mid-year sale or second-hand online. There's always someone clearing out their collection to make room for something else. So when it comes to this Optimus Prime helmet, I got complacent. You've heard this story before. I wasn't aware that only one local retailer would be getting this in. Zing, aka EB Games. I mean, this was meant to be an exclusive at GameStop in the US after all, and despite the fact that it was starting to sell out, the one or two stores that still had stock, I naively hoped it would go on sale, either because it was the last one left, a display model being discounted, or because it was EB Games and they always have a sale that you can never miss. And so, of course, I missed out. Again, the aftermarket was not providing a lot of hope. Most of the ones I saw on eBay were way more than retail price, and then there were the ones that had been signed by Peter Cullen, so of course they were asking for shitloads. FYI for anyone new around here, I already have Peter's autograph, as well as a whole cosplay photo shoot I did with him a decade ago. Shit. Oh yeah, 2024 was the 10th anniversary of that photo shoot in Victoria Square. Anyway, on my usual nightly browse, I stumbled upon an eBay listing for this helmet, secondhand, still with all its packaging, and they only wanted original retail price for it. I can't remember how long I left it for. I was just amazed no one had run off with it yet. Of course, I had a voucher, which cancelled out the cost of postage if I remember, so yeah, it kinda sorta worked out in the end. And I bloody love this design. I'm not a G1 purist, I'm just a little annoyed that for quite some time they were only making the movie Optimus helmets. And you know how much I despise those films. I only have this one because it actually has Peter's voice in it. But I love how great of an interpretation Modern Icons did with this. It's not trying too hard to be super detailed, but there's a good level of detail where appropriate. It's also not trying to be too edgy or modern, despite the company's name. It has great proportions, subtle weathering in the paintwork, and very cool lights and a decent speaker. And the best part about it, it fits my massive melon! Often these replica buckets are a bit of a crapshoot for me and my considerable cranium. Granted, I usually have to leave out the padding and that stabilising strap in order for them to fit, but a win's a win. I flip-flop between whether or not I wish this had a voice changer. Many of these higher-end replicas don't feature such, and there's an argument to be had that if you're already paying so much for these things, why not include, at the very least, a voice amplifier? But then I sort of step down from that soapbox and think, do I really want to hear myself do a really bad impersonation, or am I content to enjoy Uncle Peter's iconic and dulcet bass?
Greetings, I am Optimus Prime.
Those early voice changes from the mid to late 2000s, which is nearly 20 years ago now. Oh fuck. Like the Optimus Prime helmet, the Darth Vader helmet, the Doctor Who ones, even this original vintage Transformers helmet from the 1980s. Those are most definitely playthings that encompass your entire head. Now they just make them into masks. This one by Modern Icons follows the trend of complete buckets and is much more on the collectibles side of things, and of course you have to be a little more careful with it, but as far as I'm concerned, it's so much fun to wear and look at. The Carson Taver helmet arrived about 2 or 3 days before New Year's, but I'll admit, I already lost most of my motivation to work on much of anything for weeks either side of New Year's. I think that's become more of a muscle memory for me now, because usually something major happens around this time of year, and I have to recuperate and rechannel my energies. But this time my brain was telling me, you should probably conserve yourself just in case. I really went into holiday mode, such as it was considering my home life. Thanks for joining me. This is always a fun one, and a major one to put together. Thanks for sticking with me, or even stumbling upon my nonsense and tuning in for the first time. We'll see what happens in 2025. Lots of plans as always, but of course, a lot can happen in a short amount of time. It's gonna be a hell of a year ahead. Look after yourself and each other, and let's make it to the other end with our sanity intact.